The arena felt normal in the way storms feel normal before they rearrange coastlines. The lights were calibrated, the camera steady, the commentary restrained. Nothing on the run sheet suggested disruption, yet something in the air felt misaligned, like a hinge slightly off-center. Production assistants avoided eye contact. A producer rechecked the opening cue twice. It wasn't panic, it was anticipation without a name. Then the graphic appeared on the screen with a neutrality that felt almost cruel. Steven Seagal's daughter. No embellishment, no tagline, just lineage. The crowd didn't erupt. They hesitated. A low, confused murmur rolled through the seats. Not excitement, not hostility. Recognition mixed with skepticism. Some fans searched their phones. Others leaned back, arms folded, prepared to judge. This wasn't a beloved indie prodigy. This wasn't a long tease signing. This was a surname with cultural weight entering a system built on hierarchy and earned suffering. The hesitation was the first fracture. Backstage, the temperature shifted. Wrestlers who had clawed for years through developmental territories watched the monitor without speaking. They knew what a last name could do. They also knew what it couldn't protect you from. Careers in that locker room had been built on concussions, divorces, surgeries, and silence. The idea that someone could walk in carrying a legacy instead of scars made people uncomfortable, not angry, just unsettled. Corporate offices had framed it as cross-generational synergy, brand expansion, familiar surname crossing into sports entertainment. Executives used language about market penetration and crossover demographics. But on the arena floor, none of that vocabulary mattered. What mattered was the walk from the curtain to the ring. What mattered was whether she could own oxygen. When the music didn't hit immediately, the silence stretched longer than usual. It felt intentional, but not theatrical. The kind of pause that makes people question if something went wrong. Camera operators adjusted their stance. A referee in the ring shifted his weight. The crowd noise lowered, not out of respect, but uncertainty. Something was coming, but no one knew how to feel about it. Then she stepped out. There was no exaggerated pose, no smile, no attempt to court approval. Steven Seagal's daughter moved forward with a stillness that felt almost confrontational. Her posture was upright, controlled, heavy. She didn't rush, she didn't gesture. She walked as if the building already belonged to her. The absence of visible nerves was more disturbing than visible arrogance would have been. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo loudly either. They watched. And in that watching, something shifted. The unease deepened. Because this didn't feel like a debut seeking validation. It felt like an arrival that didn't require it. And that difference changed the temperature of the entire arena. The ramp seemed longer than usual, though nothing about the stage had changed. Each step she took felt deliberate, as if she were measuring the arena's resistance. The audience tried to find an emotional entry point. Some attempted scattered chants, unsure whether to embrace or reject her. The chants died quickly. Her silence smothered them. She did not acknowledge the noise. She did not glance at signs. She did not perform connection. In modern WWE presentation is currency. Superstars are engineered to trend within seconds. Camera cuts chase facial reactions, micro-expressions, hints of vulnerability. She gave them none. The broadcast team attempted to contextualize her lineage carefully, cautious not to overstate. Corporate had likely issued strict language boundaries. No promises, no guarantees, just acknowledgement. But even that felt fragile. Social media was already accelerating beyond control. Clips of her first steps flooded timelines. Comparisons began instantly. Some accused nepotism before she reached the ring apron. Others defended her right to opportunity. Think pieces were drafted in real time. Analysts speculated about locker room resentment. Former wrestlers posted cryptic reactions. The narrative machine spun faster than her footsteps. Backstage, conversations hardened. A mid-card veteran leaned against a crate, jaw tight. Developmental talent watched in silence, calculating the implications. A last name carries leverage in contract negotiations. It changes meeting tones. It alters creative discussions. The room understood that tonight wasn't just about performance, it was about positioning. If she succeeded instantly, it would confirm fears. If she failed, it would confirm them too. She reached the ring and paused. Not for applause, not for camera angles, but as if considering the space. The referee extended a hand to assist her onto the apron. She ignored it and stepped up alone. The gesture was subtle, but it registered. Independence or dismissal. Either way, it disrupted protocol. Her opponent stood across the ring, expression controlled but eyes alert. This wasn't a ceremonial showcase. It was a test disguised as opportunity. The bell rang without theatrics. What happened next was not dramatic. It was efficient. Within seconds, she closed distance with a precision that startled the crowd. A takedown executed cleanly. No wasted motion. No flourish. The opponent hit the mat hard enough to silence residual murmurs. Before the audience processed the sequence, it was over. A submission locked in with surgical pressure. Tap out. 3 count. Less than a minute. There was no celebration from her. No raised arms. No triumphant scream. She released the hold and stood, breathing steady, eyes forward. The arena reacted late, like a crowd waking from anesthesia. Some gasped. Others booed, unsure what exactly they were rejecting. It felt less like dominance and more like inevitability. The speed wasn't what unsettled people. It was the absence of spectacle. She didn't perform dominance. She enacted it. And that distinction made the silence afterward feel heavier than any roar could have. The immediate aftermath did not explode. It compressed. The broadcast cut to replays, but the commentary sounded cautious, almost restrained. They described technique, composure, preparedness. They avoided superlatives. Internally, executives were already recalibrating projections. A debut that decisive altered timelines. Merchandise plans would accelerate. Media appearances would multiply, but so would scrutiny. Backstage, the defeated opponent sat alone, ice pressed against her shoulder. No one mocked her. No one consoled her loudly. The locker room understood what had just happened extended beyond a single loss. Being the first body under a new arrival carries symbolic weight. It imprints narrative, defines hierarchy. And that hierarchy had just shifted violently. Steven Seagal's daughter returned through the curtain without expression. No smile, no relief. Producers offered brief nods, professional approval disguised as neutrality. One executive extended a hand. She shook it once, firmly, then continued walking. There was no visible gratitude, no deference. She moved as if this result had been expected, not earned. The pressure began instantly. Media requests stacked, interviews framed around lineage, questions about her father's influence, comparisons that would follow her indefinitely. She answered with brevity, careful not to amplify the surname while unable to escape it. The brand needed the connection. She needed independence. The tension between those objectives would not resolve easily. Online discourse intensified. Clips of the submission circulated with slowed analysis. Some praised the realism. Others dismissed the booking as manufactured dominance. Veteran wrestlers hinted at backstage politics without naming names. The narrative shifted from her performance to what her presence represented. Access, protection, corporate strategy. Inside the locker room, a subtle distancing occurred. Conversations paused when she entered. Not out of hostility, but recalibration. Every rising talent measures themselves against newcomers. In her case, they also measured the invisible shield around her. Would creative protect her from failure? Would losses be permitted? Would criticism be softened? Authority figures felt something slipping. Control in WWE is a performance as much as it is policy. But her arrival had created variables outside traditional control. The brand had invited a surname heavy enough to bend expectation. If she faltered, headlines would follow. If she dominated too convincingly, resentment would grow. Either direction carried risk. She trained late that night, long after the cameras stopped rolling. No entourage, no public display. Just repetition, precision, silence. The ring ropes absorbed the impact of her movements without applause. It was unclear whether she trained to improve or to outrun perception. What lingered was not excitement. It was weight. A sense that something irreversible had been introduced into the ecosystem. Not chaos, not rebellion. Something colder, something procedural. And everyone in that building felt the adjustment. In the days that followed, the company leaned into ambiguity. Promotional materials highlighted her composure rather than her heritage, but the surname remained unavoidable. Marketing teams debated taglines, cautious not to frame her as invincible. Investors monitored engagement metrics closely. The debut had trended globally, but trend lines are fragile. Sustained relevance requires narrative friction. Steven Seagal's daughter did not chase attention. She declined certain appearances, focusing instead on controlled media environments. That decision sparked its own speculation. Was she being shielded? Was she dictating terms? In a system where most talent negotiates from insecurity, perceived leverage becomes combustible. Other wrestlers began to adjust their performances subtly. Aggression sharpened. Promos carried undertones of resentment without direct reference. The ring is a workplace disguised as theater, and workplace politics always bleed through. Her presence altered the emotional temperature of matches she wasn't even part of. Corporate leadership convened quietly. There were concerns about sustainability. Debut that dominant sets expectation high. Can she maintain it without stagnation? If she loses too soon, it undermines the initial impact. If she doesn't lose at all, it alienates the roster. The calculus became delicate. Creative meetings grew longer. Meanwhile, fan sentiment fractured further. Some embraced the efficiency of her style, craving realism in an era saturated with spectacle. Others interpreted her silence as arrogance. Social media amplified extremes, as it always does. Every training clip was dissected, every facial expression interpreted. What complicated matters most was the absence of emotional access. She did not offer vulnerability. She did not narrate struggle publicly. Modern audiences are conditioned to bond through confession. Without it, distance grows. The distance can translate into intimidation, but also isolation. In the locker room, one unspoken question circulated. How far will this go? Not in terms of titles, but influence. Will her ascent redefine the division's hierarchy? Will opportunities narrow for others? Careers in WWE are fragile. One stalled push can cost years. Her momentum felt like gravity pulling resources toward her orbit. She remained consistent. Training. Arriving on time. Leaving late. No visible indulgence. No overt alliances. The discipline disarmed some critics but intensified others, because if she was not coasting on lineage, then she was simply that prepared. And that realization is more threatening than favoritism. The company had wanted impact. They received it. But impact lingers. It reshapes landscapes. It creates pressure points. And as weeks passed, it became clear that her debut was not an isolated event. It was the beginning of a recalibration that no one fully understood. Months later, the initial shock had faded, but the consequences had not. The division felt tighter, more competitive, less forgiving. Matches involving her carried a different silence before the bell. Opponents studied her footage obsessively, searching for vulnerability. So far, they found discipline instead. Steven Seagal's daughter had not become louder. She had become more controlled. Each appearance reinforced the same tone. Restrained dominance. No theatrics. No visible hunger for applause. The audience still hadn't fully decided how to feel. That unresolved tension became part of her identity. Corporate narratives attempted to humanize her gradually, but carefully. A documentary segment here. Training vignette there. Nothing excessive. The brand feared overexposure as much as backlash. Internally, there were debates about championship positioning. Elevating her too quickly could fracture morale. Delaying too long could waste momentum. In the locker room, acceptance did not arrive dramatically. It settled slowly. Respect in WWE is rarely granted through marketing. It is earned through repetition, durability, and pain tolerance. She absorbed physical punishment without visible complaint. She showed up the next night regardless of impact. That consistency began to shift perception, not into affection, into acknowledgement. Still, the cost was visible in quieter moments. Isolation follows dominance. She often stood alone before events, headphones on, gaze distant. The surname that opened doors also built walls. Every achievement risked being attributed to lineage. Every mistake would be magnified. The media cycle continued to orbit her father's shadow, but she refused to lean into it. No public commentary, no exploitation of controversy. It's just measured presence. It created a strange paradox. She was both central to the brand's current momentum and emotionally inaccessible within it. Authority figures regained partial control by integrating her into broader storylines, diluting singular focus. But the initial disruption never fully dissolved. There remained a memory of that first night, the silence, the efficiency, the unsettling lack of celebration. WWE had introduced something it believed it could manage. Instead, it had altered its internal chemistry. It's not through rebellion or spectacle, but through restraint and inevitability. The division was sharper now. The politics more transparent, the stakes heavier. And at the center stood a woman who had said almost nothing. The question that lingers is not whether she can dominate again. It is whether anyone in that building, including her, truly understands what was set in motion the moment she walked through that curtain.